Hi, and welcome to this introduction to Repro 5, which joins the older Repro 1 to form the Repro bundle. At first glance, Repro 5 is simply the polyphonic version of Repro 1. Both synths feature two oscillators, plus a single low-pass filter, with a pair of envelopes and an LF over modulation. And both can access all the same oscillator, filter and envelope models via the tweaks page. But while Repro 1 spices up its monophonic nature with an arpeggiator, and a sequencer, Repro 5 instead provides up to 8 voices, so you can play chords. With a unison mode, which stacks all voices on a single key to create a monster monosynth. The modulation system is also slightly different. And if I switch to the Effects tab, we can see that Repro 1's Jaws wavefolder effect has been replaced with a polyphonic distortion section. Plus the Velvet effect, which provides a range of different saturation styles with very different colours. All these little differences stack up and help to give each synth its own very unique character. Of course, one thing a polyphonic synth undoubtedly does better than a monosynth is pad sounds. So let's start with the Init preset and tweak the amp envelope to give us a long release and a slower, softer attack. And I'll also drop the sustain level a bit and up the decay slightly to give each note a bit more shape. I might also turn up the little velocity trim pot so the envelope responds to my playing dynamics and the sound gets quieter when I play more gently. I'm also going to reduce the number of voices to 5 to match the number available in the classic hardware synth that Repro 5 pays homage to. Okay, I'm going to focus on oscillator A to start with. So let's turn oscillator B down in the mixer for now. Like Repro 1, oscillator A has a choice of sawtooth or square shapes, or both together. Although with the default oscillator models, Repro 5 gets louder when you do this, while Repro 1 gets quieter. I'll stick with just the square, but I can change this to a pulse wave instead by adjusting the pulse width knob. This reintroduces lots of the even harmonics that are missing from the square wave. And the sound gets thinner as you reach the extremes. If you make the pulse too narrow in either direction, the wave disappears entirely. So let's reset this to a square wave and look at the modulation options over to the left, starting with the wheel mod section at the bottom. I'll turn on the pulse width A destination button and push up the mod wheel to start modulating the pulse width of oscillator A with the LFO. Cyclic pulse width modulation like this can make a single oscillator sound like two detuned waveforms, with the amount of apparent detuning dependent on the LFO's speed, as well as the modulation depth, which is always controlled by the mod wheel. But with maximum modulation, the wave starts to disappear at the extremes. So I'm going to drag the little white triangle down a bit to limit the upper range of the mod wheel to a more sensible value. This makes a nice rich sound when playing chords. But the modulation has an obviously cyclic quality, which gets more noticeable the faster the modulation speed, and which is exacerbated by the fact that all voices in the chord are being modulated the same way by a single monophonic LFO. If I turn up the source mix knob to the left, I can crossfade to random noise as a modulation source instead. This certainly doesn't sound cyclic anymore, but it's a very different effect. However, blending just a tiny bit of noise into the LFO signal can help to make the modulation sound a bit more organic and natural. It still sounds quite cyclic, however, so let's turn off this assignment and turn on the pulse width destination in the upper voice mod section instead, and turn up the filter envelope knob. And I can't get very far before the pulse width gets too narrow and the wave disappears. The filter envelope shape is very simple at the moment. Minimum attack time and maximum sustain means it just jumps to its maximum value as soon as I press a key, and stays there as long as I hold it. But this is useful for setting the maximum modulation. So you would assume that if I turn down the actual pulse width parameter for oscillator A, I would then be able to turn up the modulation further before the pulse width gets too narrow. But actually this makes it worse. In fact, the modulation is negative, so I need to turn the pulse width up instead. Now, when I increase the envelope modulation depth, we can hear the pulse width widens to begin with, then turns into a square wave, then comes out the other side as a pulse wave again. And I can set the knob higher before the pulse width gets too narrow. Okay, let's set a more interesting envelope shape with a very slow attack and decay, and minimum sustain. And let's add a healthy release as well. Now we get a long, slow sweep of the pulse width for each note. But crucially, each note gets its own independent sweep, as each voice has its own envelope. This is the crucial difference between the filter envelope and oscillator B sources in the voice mod section, which are both polyphonic and different for each voice, and the LFO and noise sources in the wheel mod section, which are monophonic and will affect all voices the same. Okay, let's turn oscillator B up in the mixer instead, and switch it to the square wave. And let's turn on the pulse width B destination in the wheel mod section to modulate it with the LFO as we did for oscillator A earlier. If I now blend both oscillators together, and maybe detune them both a touch using the little trim pots, the sound becomes pleasantly rich and complex. Let's add a touch of noise in the mixer as well, and wind down the filter a little, possibly with less key tracking, and turn up the filter envelope knob so the filter opens up and then closes down gently for each note. The voice detune knob below adds small tuning variations between voices, enough to sound positively out of tune with higher values. But small amounts of this can make chords sound more interesting, and add a little bit more analog character to the sound. I always like Aftertouch to do something interesting with this type of sound. The second modulation slot already has this selected as the source, so all I need to do is drag from the destination field and drop onto the knob I want to modulate, in this case oscillator A frequency. If I turn the depth up all the way for the slot, then pressing down hard on a key will shift the oscillator up one octave, which gives me another useful performance option. Remember, I can already use the mod wheel to control the depth of LFO modulation for oscillator B, so I can use this to go from a calmer, more static sound with the wheel down, to a richer sound with more movement with the wheel up. Okay, now let's switch to the Effects tab and turn on the Distortion section. 4 different distortion types are available, but I'm going to stick with soft clipping for now and turn up the amount knob by just a few dB to thicken the sound and add harmonics without sounding obviously distorted. The tone knob acts like a tilt filter, so you can make it sound warmer or brighter. And you can soften the distortion by blending it with the dry signal. This distortion section is polyphonic, unlike the rest of the effects, which is why it has to be the first effect in the chain and can't be reordered like the others. This means that when playing chords, there's no complex intermodulation between notes. Each note gets its own independent distortion, and the sound doesn't get any dirtier as you add more notes. This also adds another interesting possibility. This sound works well over a wide range of the keyboard, but lower notes sound good with more distortion to add extra harmonics and a bit more volume, while higher notes risk sounding harsh if the drive is too high and sound better cleaner. So I'll click the first modulation slot that we haven't used yet and choose Key Follow. Either of them will do. Then drag to assign this to the distortion drive knob, and turn the depth knob down so that higher notes get less distortion and lower notes get more. I can now hold rich, dirty low notes while simultaneously playing sweet, clean high notes. And the sound works better over a wider range of the keyboard. Let's contrast this with the Velvet Stompbox to the right. A number of different modes are available, and many have usefully descriptive names such as bright or dark, which colour the sound with more subtlety and complexity than you could achieve with EQ. Alternatively, try the A800 model, more neutral in tone, but with the round fatness of analog tape. But unlike the polyphonic distortion to the left, if I drive Velvet hard and play chords, the voices start to interact with one another to create a much more complex sound. So let's add some delay from the Lyrebird effect. And some drench reverb. And sometimes it can sound more interesting if you drag the Velvet module after these effects in the chain, as the dry signal will now interact subtly with the reverb and delay tails when it hits this saturation stage. This is a relatively simple and straightforward patch with nothing too complex going on, yet the sound is very rich and satisfying. And notice I haven't needed to turn on the high quality option at the top. This is more likely to make a difference when using audio rate modulation, which is something I'll look at in part 3. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.